Now, our next speaker is KOJIMA Fuhito, professor at the Graduate School of Economics, the University of Tokyo, and director of the University of Tokyo Market Design Center. His research focuses on market design, matching theory, and game theory. In 2021, he was elected as a fellow of the Econometric Society. So please welcome Professor KOJIMA.
Wow, this is a big audience. I'm being nervous. Well, anyways, thank you so much for coming here. It's such a big honor for me to give a talk after Marianne. Okay, so as Yamamoto-san said, I'm a researcher doing research and education in a field called market design. So that's a field of economics and related fields. So today's topic is really big, but I believe sincerely that there's something that we can contribute to this debate from the perspective and insights from the market design. Okay, so for that reason, I will mostly talk about what this market design is, and then we will give a few examples of what we are doing. Okay, so how is it going to be related? So please wait for 5 minutes or so, because I'd like to first explain what the market design is. Okay, on that note, let's begin. Before that, so I should firstly say that much of what I will talk about today is based on the team effort of the Market Design Center here at University of Tokyo. So I'd like to thank my colleagues and students and staff members of the center. Okay, let's go. Okay, so what is market design? So in one word, the market design can be said to be a science and engineering of designing institutions. Okay, so what is institutions? Well, that's a big word. One way to think of institutions is bunch of rules, such as legal rules, rules in the corporations, maybe the rules in a municipality, or maybe the social norms, things like that. And this will give some rough rule of what kind of behaviors are allowed, and as a function of the behavior of the members of the society, how the resources are allocated. Okay? The problem with institutions sometimes is that the conventional way to make institutions are largely by trial and error. So it depends on history, and people try to make it and maybe put a patchwork on this and that place, and things usually works. But there's basically no guarantee that we have reached a quote-unquote optimal institutions. Okay, maybe that's obvious. The market design researchers step back a little bit and think of the big problem of how to optimally design a institution for a good allocation of resources. Okay. So how can we do it? Well, it's actually a pretty difficult problem, because when we design institutions, maybe you are a government or you are a CEO in the company, the institutions may or may not work as intended, right? Why? Well, that is because the institutions' rules usually can give only a rough idea, rough constraints on what you can do as a member of the society, and it does not tell you what exactly happens and what kind of allocation is going to be done. So for that reason, well, instead, the rules can just give some incentives for the members of society, what they would like to do within the bound of the rules, and that gives what kind of actions are done, and then finally we get the resource allocation. So it's very hard to predict. However, the fortunate fact is that, well, the economists have studied this problem for a long time using a lot of things, including game theory, which that gives some prediction on under a given rule of the game, the institutions, what kind of incentives are given to the participants, and hence how they act, and so that through this indirect route, we have some prediction ability to predict what kind of institutions will result in what kind of resource allocation. Okay, market design take that development in mind and flip the question, which is, well, now let's start with what kind of resource allocation we'd like to realize, and then solve the problem backwards, okay? We have something we'd like to do in terms of resource allocation, and then design the institutions in such a way that will achieve the desired allocation. Okay, that has been a sort of abstract way of describing market design. Let me give some examples very quickly. So this idea has been actually implemented in collaboration between researchers and practitioners on many things listed here. So for example, in the medical doctors allocations, which is a pretty important healthcare problem, and a public school allocation, which I will actually spend some time on today. So in these problems, obviously the allocations are quite important, and then the rules has been designed consciously, taking into account the incentives of the players, the members of society, under that rule. Okay, so there are a lot of other things. So maybe let me mention one thing. The idea has also been implemented in perhaps unexpected places, such as organ allocation, even. Okay. All right. So why does it matter for today's conversation? So, well, I'm not actually an expert on the capitalism per se, so here's a sort of caricatured version of capitalism and socialism. So capitalism, as Marianne has already explained, the features of free market and this idea that basically that will give enough incentives and that could, under some conditions, maximize social welfare. But as already pointed out by Marianne, that does not work as well if there are market failures. So just to give a additional example, so there may be even some markets where the prices cannot be just used for a lot of reasons, including ethical concerns. That might be obvious in the organ allocation, for example. Organ trade is illegal in almost all countries in the world, for example. Okay, then can we do better by using some version of socialism? The socialism is more based on command and control, some non-price mechanism approach. The problem is that oftentimes that is pretty bad at actually coordinating incentives. Okay, so in the extreme version, a social planner will just give some good whether or not they like it or not. So that does not sound like a particularly good way to do it. Oops. So market design, I argue, could help here because it can sort of like be a best of both worlds. So why? Well, we do the conscious design, trying to solve the ethical problem and so on, but without necessarily using a market mechanism or price mechanism. On the other hand, unlike perhaps the caricatured version of socialism, when designing the institutions, we take incentives of the participants seriously and get information that is valuable in order to achieve a social goal. Okay? So that is a sort of idea of a market design. Okay. All right, so these are still a little bit abstract, so let me spend the remaining 10 minutes giving you some very concrete examples. Okay, so let's think about high school in Japan, okay? So this is based on our team effort at the Market Design Center. So a couple of years ago, we wrote a report basically pointing out some problem with the current practice in the Japanese public high school match, okay? For those of you who are in Japan, probably you are familiar with this. In Japan, in the public high school, you take the exam and then apply to a school. And the allocation of high school to students to high school is administered by each prefecture. And almost all prefectures use the so-called single application system, meaning that a student is allowed to list only one school in their application. If you get in, that's good. If you do not get in, well, too bad, okay? Sounds risky, right? Let's think of it in some more detail, right? Okay, so what is the actual problem with the single application system? Well, suppose that you are a pretty good student, and you would like to go to school A, okay? But on the exam day, you may not do as well as you should, and maybe you will not get in, okay? The problem is that if you are not admitted to your dream school when you take the exam, then you cannot be considered, even considered for your second choice or third choice or fourth choice. It's a very bad thing to happen. And obviously, that is bad both from the perspective of efficiency, meaning maximize maybe the welfare, or from the viewpoint of fairness, right? Fairness because you might be actually qualified for your second choice school totally, but you are still not admitted. That sounds pretty unfair, okay? So that's the problem one. Problem two is associated problem. So if you are in such a situation with single application system, what do you think? You might actually hesitate to actually apply to your dream school. Instead, you might be tempted to apply to your second or third or fourth choice if they have a lower cutoff score in the exam, okay? And that actually happens all the time, right? And that also makes it hard for these kids and their parents. Basically, you will be forced to play this difficult admission game, and that effort needs a lot of resources, and that's a socially wasteful activity. And again, this can be considered to be unfair because typically that kind of information could be very easy for well-off people to get if they are in the, let's say, private tutoring and so on, but maybe not if you are not from the advantaged background, okay? So for these reasons, there seems to be some room for improvement, and here's the improvement. Okay, so it turns out that this is a very typical problem that people already know a solution about. And namely, there is an algorithm-based admission system where the algorithm is called the deferred acceptance algorithm or the Gale and Shapley algorithm due to the inventor of the algorithm. So the idea is the following. Instead of allowing you to apply to only one school, well, you are allowed to submit a rank order list, meaning a list of schools from the first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on, as many as you want. And given that information, we have a particular computer algorithm to decide which student is admitted to which school. And the algorithm is carefully done in such a way that we will solve these two problems that I mentioned. Basically, computer allows that each student to be kind of virtually, of course, apply from the top, and then if they are not admitted, then apply back to the second choice and so on until you will be finally accepted. So the problem of, let's say, this falling through cracks problem is going to be solved. And associatedly, and you can actually mathematically show that this also completely get rid of the gaming incentive problem, i.e., for each applicant, submitting the preferences that is totally truthful is a best thing for the applicant to do. So basically, you will not have to worry about how to strategically submit the preferences. And that's good for everybody. Okay, so that's the theory. And actually, it's not even just theory. Indeed, it has been applied and implemented in many places. The most famous may be the New York City that happened in 2005 and with a lot of success. And it spread to many US universities, including Chicago, where Marianne is working, but many other cities and across the world. Unfortunately, not in the Japanese public high school yet. But in case that people, you might think that, well, every country is different, which it is. Well, even in Japan, actually, a special cases of this algorithm is very common, namely in the assignment of daycare seats to kids. Actually, municipality do the matching allocation of the daycare seats to kids here in Japan, and the majority of the municipalities are already using it. So I propose that we seriously think about this in context of school admission. Okay. So we have been talking about proposing this for some time, and currently we kind of got the we are now talking about this with interested prefectures, which are the organizers of this matching system. So hopefully I can report you, well, in my next time here in Tokyo Forum, that we succeeded, but that has not happened yet. All right. Okay, so we have lots of things to talk about, so let's move on to another thing. So now I'd like to talk about medical doctor allocation, which I also mentioned is a major application of this idea. Okay, actually, in Japan, when allocating medical doctors or medical residents to hospitals in the country, this algorithm-based matching, namely the deferred acceptance algorithm, was actually introduced in 2003. So it has more than 20 years of history already with a lot of success. Okay, and then, but later, there was actually issue, concern among some people that, well, doctors are not allocated evenly across different regions of the country. Okay, basically in places like Tokyo and Osaka attracts a lot of doctors, and perhaps in the detriment of other rural regions. And the government has introduced, in response in 2009, the regulation saying that, well, in each prefecture, the number of doctors should be regulated. For example, these are the numbers. In Tokyo Prefecture, for example, before the introduction of the regulation, the number of advertised positions were about 1,600. But now it has been reduced by about 20%. Okay? And similarly for some other prefectures, like Osaka has hit quite hard. Okay, and then the problem, somewhat technically sounding problem, is that, well, how do we actually modify the allocation mechanism in institutions to honor this regulation while still trying to have a good outcome, okay? And currently, what is done is, well, use the same algorithm, this Gale-Shapley deferred acceptance algorithm, but then just reduce the capacity for each hospital in the region to meet this capacity quota, okay? And I pointed out in one of the papers that this particular way of doing it is a little bit actually wasteful, okay? Meaning that there may be some excess loss of efficiency and fairness in order to achieve this regional balance. So here's the example. So here's a hypothetical imaginary prefecture A. So there are two hospitals. One is the unpopular hospital, and the other is popular hospital. And suppose that there are 10 doctors here, and the regional cap is imposed as 9. So only 9 doctors could be hired in this region. The way that the current matching mechanism does is to reduce the capacity for each hospital proportionally, but then that means you can only match a few people. And note that these 3 seats over there is not allocated. So that's a problem. And we made an algorithm to actually basically automatically move these unallocated seats in a flexible manner to other hospitals in the same region so that we can actually get it right. More people could be matched. Of course, we need to do it in a little bit careful way in order to keep other good properties. But basically, this has been done. All right. And here's a simulation to show that this has some sizable effect of reducing the number of doctors who are not matched at all. Okay. So I have just given 2 examples where the ideas from market design could help. And hopefully, the message I wanted to convey is that, well, this can also be beneficial as a way to solve some concrete problems, combining the ideas from capitalism or perhaps price-based incentive-conscious ideas and the conscious nice design where you may not be just using the money, okay? So that's it, and I'm very excited to talk more about it in the next couple of hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kojima.